My name is Samuel Calvin Still III. I am 59 years of age, and I am from Morristown, New Jersey. My earliest memory of growing up, I would say following my dogs out in the woods and getting lost and my mother looking for me. Yeah, that would be one of my earliest. And playing in the stream in my backyard. I would be catching frogs and snakes, and just, the stream was like my playground when I was a kid. And the backyard was out in the woods was my playground. Yeah. I really wanted to be a park ranger when I got to high school, and I changed my mind when I realized how much money they didn't make. So I went to college for architectural engineering. But I initially, and what's funny is that I have an older son who's 38, and he's a park ranger in North Carolina. Yeah, so he got it honestly. He's all into reptiles too. He wants, like, I'm telling you, he's going to turn into the reptile man. My summers out, what happened during the summertime, like most African-American kids, they went south because most of their families were from south. My family was from Chemung, from Pine Barrens and Mahali. And during the summers, I had an aunt and uncle that lived on a huge dairy farm. They worked for a farmer here, not too far in Lumberton from here. And they used to drop us off on Fridays and then pick us back up either Sunday mornings or Sunday afternoon to go to church. But we would play in the hay, play up in the barn, in the hay, jumping down from the top of the hay pile down to the ground. I remember messing with the cows all the time. I remember, we would walk up to the cows and smack them, all that kind of stuff. There was a time when my father and I came, and we were going to go run the dogs, hunting dogs, and we asked my cousin Angelo, was the bull out in the herd? And he was like, no, Mr. Jones, I think Mr. Jones got the bull penned up. And we go out there, and the herd is out there, and the herd split, and the bull just walked right through the middle of them. And we started running through the stream, through the whatever, trying to get away from the bull because they were chasing us. But yeah, they were good times. I learned how to shoot a .22 rifle at the age of 6 years old out on the farm, out there just hanging out. And my bigger cousin had show pigeons. That was like his thing. And he was like the 6'2" guy, looked like a small Andre the Giant type. He was a big muscular guy. It was so funny to always see him, the love that he had for these show pigeons. Because you'd be like, what are you doing? Like, who has show pigeons? But yeah, that's, and my aunt she would make homemade ice cream, and we had to crank the ice cream machine. And we'd be sitting there for hours trying to make this ice cream. Yeah, the barbecues were out there. Family, it was good times, and all the cousins would show up, and we just had a blast. And then we had a blast, and then we would go down across the street down to the Rancocas Creek and go swimming, and that kind of stuff. So we had fun. It was at that time, yeah, very close, and we were very close knit. We all a few of us, we would stay at houses all the time, but the dairy farm was where to go. And we were a bunch of rough little dirty kids running around the farm. And my aunt had a garden, and Uncle Butch was a boxer, retired. He was a Golden Gloves boxer. He was a really big guy, but his hands were always bent, and he never really talked much. But Uncle Butch, what I remember Uncle Butch was that when he came to our house and he wanted some ice cream, they got him a whole half gallon of ice cream. He would sit there and eat the whole half gallon of ice cream by himself. Well, the Brotherton Reservation, my dad's family lived on the original homestead 11 in Charity Still out in Chemung. And where it was next to where the old Brotherton Indian Reservation was at. My father showed me the home when I was a child, and I had a picture of it, but I lost it. But yeah, he would take me out there, show me where the cedar swamps was at, where they harvested cedar wood. He would take me down to the Indian sawmill area and show me where Dr. James Still was born, what school they used to go to in Indian Mills. And yeah, he would show me those places when I was a kid. At Zion Lake. I remember going down to Piccalilli's when black folks didn't really go to Piccalilli in. My father, because he knew all those people, right? He grew up with a lot of those people, a lot of families, the Gardner families, the Adam families, all those old Indian Mills, Chemung names. He grew up with a lot of those people. So we would go into the Pine Barrens and meet and, be at places where people would be like, you went where? Like, yeah, my father grew up with their grandfather or something like that, and that kind of thing. So I never had any issues about being in the Pine Barrens as a kid. I remember fourth grade, my father, we were studying, I think, the Pine Barrens or something, and my fourth grade teacher wanted to take a field trip. And I had told him my father had taking me down to a place called Pasadena. It was an old clay pottery place. And had kilns, the kilns were still there or whatever. And he took us there, took a whole fourth grade class down there. And I remember us crawling through the tunnels and my father saying to the teacher, I think there's snakes around here. So he had to take us out of there. But yeah, he took us all down to the Pine Barrens. It was fun. My father, yeah. My father and his family, they they called them Pineys. And I remember people saying to me as I got older that I had this, they say, you have a piney patois. I don't know what that means. But they did. As I got older, you could tell that like my Aunt Grace and my Uncle Charlie and all them, they had different words that were different and they weren't Southern, but they weren't really New Jerseyan or Philadelphian, but they had their own little words for things. Yeah, that piney patois is what we called it. Yeah, people are backwards because they live out in the country, and that's not true. It's not true. And at the Pine Barrens, although it's flat, the ecology is the environment is so different, and you have to look for it, you know, and you have to kind of appreciate it. When you go down the Millica River, the Batsto River, kayak down it, and it's really cool when you get into those back areas in the Pine Barrens and you get to the cedar groves, you know. I've been down at Bella Plain sometimes kayaking, and you can hear the wind blowing through the trees. Like there's a whistle that most people not everybody recognizes, but it's the wind blowing through these trees. So yeah, that's to me is what makes the Pine Barrens really cool and unique in own regard. Well, when I was a kid, they made me read. My parents made me read his autobiography, "The Life and Times of Dr. James Still," early recollections of Dr. James Still. So I had to read that like almost every summer while I was in elementary school. So by the time I got 13, my mother talked me into giving a presentation at Charles Street School in Palmyra to a bunch of fourth and fifth graders, whatever the grade. I think it was like third and fourth graders. So I actually can say I've been telling my family story since the age of 13. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I had to read it, and then my father would take us out, and he would find tea berry. This is tea berry. This is where we make tea at. So we'd go back home, make this tea. Sassafras. He showed me how to dig sassafras up. Um, and it's funny because my father created the first a Boy Scout troop in Mount Holly for African Americans because they wouldn't allow the black kids to join the Boy Scouts, right? So he was a scoutmaster, and he never told me about it growing up because he had finished when he got married or whatever, and had kids, had a family. We never went. He never said, "Well, you need to join the Boy Scouts," because I guess he figured that he was showing me everything that I needed to do, you know. And which I always thought was really cool is and then when he passed on in 2007, I had grown men come to me and say, what your father taught us in the Scouts got me through Vietnam. because he had him out hunting, had him out in the woods at night and all kinds of just doing stuff. So yeah, he was cool like that. He was. And my mother didn't like animals, so we would always kind of tease her with animals, and I used to get in trouble. We had dogs and cats and hamsters. She didn't like the hamsters at all because they were like rats to her. But yeah. My grandfather was a farmer because he lived on the original homestead, living in Charity still. His grandfather or his father was a farmer. There were farmers all the way back to Lebanon and Charity still. My grandparents. My mother just was at home. She went to Cheney State for a while. She didn't finish, and she married my dad. And I had an older sister named Lynn. Lynn passed away from complications of multiple sclerosis later on as she got older. But my father worked at RCA as a technician for a while. He used the GI Bill, learned how to do electronics after the war. And he got tired of being on the assembly line, so he created his own business. He did carpentry work. And then he went back to RCA and he was the lead carpenter for a while, and that's where he retired from. I'm a construction manager. I work for the Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm a project manager. And that's my father's one who got me into construction and the carpenter. He used to say to me, "Don't be the guy swinging the hammer. Be the engineer. Be the guy running the job." So I took that to heart, and I went off to school and I got a degree from North Carolina A&T State University down in Greensboro, and my degree's in architectural engineering. And I built high rises. I've built stadiums, hospitals, schools, and now I'm just doing small projects with the U.S. Army. I was the guy, little kid, always there right next to him, handing the tools. He used to always say to me when he would measure things, he would say, "Give me the good end of the tape measure," and that meant for me to give him the end that you hold, because you didn't have to read anything. And what he was doing was trying to teach me how to read the tape measure. And I always hated, like, why don't I get the good end? I don't know how to read this tape measure. I remember he would be up on roofs doing roof jobs, and he would be like, "Throw me up that hammer." You like, "What do you mean?" He would say, "Throw it right at my head, and if I miss it, that's my fault." And one day I said, "Well, why do you want me to throw it that way?" And he said, "Well, if you throw it off to the side and I go to reach for it, it's a good chance of me falling off the roof. Versus if you throw it right at me, either I'm gonna block it or I'm gonna catch it." But doing those kind of things and then working with him like that, I mean, even as a 5-year-old kid, even before going into kindergarten, he would take me on his jobs, and I'd be the little guy running around with him, handing him this tool or holding this piece of wood or helping him, handing him the tool because he did electrical work. I remember a house that we did down in Milford or Eastham Township, and he brought a heating system, and he had to buy it in Hainesport. And I asked the guy, could I ride in the big truck? Because he delivered it with a big Mack truck, had a trailer on it. And my father said, "Yeah, you can take him." So we lost my father following him back, but I remembered how to get all the way back into, I want to say Eastham, right? How they all the way back up into where it was at. And my father was just amazed that I knew at a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid how to get somewhere. And the guy was like, "Yeah, your son knew exactly what turn to do, where to go." But, I always with him all the time doing construction work with him. They do. They do. Dr. Sill became a doctor because when he was a kid, the doctor came and vaccinated the children, his brothers and sisters. And he always, since that moment that he saw that, he was like, that's what I want to do. So I always say to people, you got to introduce your children to different things, whether they like it or don't. You just got to get it, because you never know what thing stimulates them to say, you know what, I want to go do that, or I want to look into that. You know, I also had a great aunt on my mother's side who owned a house all the way in Providence, Rhode Island. So, and they were selling the house. So every summer, for like 3 or 4 summers, it was a 4-story spiral case. It had a marble fireplace in every single room. And we would go up there every summer for like 2 or 3 weeks. My father was working on a house. And it was down the street from Brown University. So all these brownstones were these beautiful homes. And I was just fascinated by the architecture and helping my father work on things, you know? So I remember those days. I remember, again, working with him, I didn't have a tool belt, but I always had, hand him the hammer, hand him this. And when he worked on the cars, I'm gonna need the car with him, hand him the right tools, learning the different tools, different sizes. And, that mechanical inclination in me came from my father. It's got more developed, if anything. It's more developed. It's not, it still has areas where it's kind of scary at night, but there's a lot more development going on. And then we've gotten so disrespectful to each other. I don't know. Um, it depends on where you're at, but it's more developed, I would say. It's definitely more developed. There's not as many farms, and there's not as many, I would say, African Americans that live out there anymore, because my father knew families that still lived out there, all the way into the 70s and 80s. So, yeah. So it's changed. It's got a little more commercialized, unfortunately, and there's pockets, but yeah, it's more commercialized. Now we got these big deportation centers they're building, all these warehouses, right? Mm. Um, I think that we're still trying. I think people are going to still try to hold on to it, though. Some of it. There's maybe more resistance to some things as it goes to change, but it's life. Life is it's going to change. We just hope that we can save some of it, so we can talk about it later on. The different to different to our kids, and we can teach them about it, so it's not never forgotten. You know, those type of things. I think that's the best you can do, because life is always going to be changing, and unfortunately, and you can't go back once you release something. It's hard to go back. Like we talk about, like the good old days was good, but think about it. Racism was the diversity and the racism back then is you had it, but we dealt with each other. The communities, you dealt with more of your community, right? So that over time has changed as time goes on. Which some of it's good, some of it's not good. We don't know our neighbors anymore. I grew up in a black community in Morristown. My community has changed. I don't really know my neighbors, and they don't really come out. We don't really exchange enough to talk to each other. Because they're just different cultures sometimes. Like they say, Sunday mornings is the most segregated time in this country, because you go to your church, white folks go to their churches, and there's not a whole lot of mixing, and you don't spend the time breaking bread with each other to really know, to learn about each other. Yeah, because people thought they were strange. People thought they were, because there are some strange folks. Well, I don't know if the right word is strange. People just live differently. You know what I mean? And when you don't have running water, or you don't have a septic tank system, you got an outhouse. You know, and that is probably far and few between people have an outhouse anymore. But I know when I was growing up a kid, there were some houses we went to that didn't have any septic tank. You know, and it was weird as a kid. You're like, I'm not using that. But yeah, I think that's what the changes have happened, and somehow or another, we need to hold on to those, not only the memories, but to hold on to some of that land if we can. And unfortunately for my family, they lost it over taxes during the Depression. Because my grandfather, they had over 100 acres in Chemung, Indian Mills. And unfortunately, because of the Depression, they lost it over taxes, which a lot of people did, black and white. It just wasn't black people, but unfortunately, disproportionately, black folks had lost a lot of property or got stolen from them. Well, I think the Pinelands, the culture is always a little different anyway, you know, and people take pride in that. And I just think that over time, as it got more commercialized, you have a few pockets of people but people grow up. Like with my family, there was an opportunity to get some of the property back in the 60s. But at that time, nobody was trying to be a farmer. The jobs were in Philadelphia, Camden, they were in the cities. They were good paying jobs. So who wants to go move out and grow sweet potatoes when you can go get a job in, the urban setting and that kind of thing. So a lot of that has gone away. But now there's a resurgence of people going back to using herbal remedies and medicines and growing your own garden. I think after when COVID hit, everybody started, oh, I can grow my own plants. I can grow my own food, you know? So there's a resurgence of that I think is really cool. There's not that many opportunities in the Pine Barrens, right? So why would you really want to stay? That's like people who live down south, you know? But it's funny that people now, a lot of African Americans are returning back to those areas, right? I just met a gentleman yesterday, and he's retired now, but him and his brother went back. They had property in Alabama, and now they have a cattle ranch. They bought 200 acres and they raise cattle. So he went back home to using some of that land, and it's a shame because I don't know, for some reason we want the new stuff, right? We don't want to go fix up a house that grandma lived in. Even though the property might be paid for, we want to sell it to get a little bit of money so we can split it between 5 people or whatever, and then go buy some brand new house somewhere where you're living next to somebody. I would never do that. I would never want to live right next to somebody that close. I do have neighbors, but my dream would be living on the side of a mountain somewhere and just, yeah, being with nature. I was one of those kids that there was a TV show or movie. It was a TV show called Grizzly Adams, and the guy lived in Denver or Colorado somewhere, and he had a pet bear, and he was Grizzly Adams, and I loved it. I tell people all the time, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Native American. If I could be any other race that I could be, I wanted to be a Native American. Why? Because they hunted and fished, they lived on the land, and they rode horses. And I just thought that was so cool. And if I could do anything else, if I could be anybody else, I would be out Midwest somewhere. I always thought I was going to design a house in the mountains somewhere. And when you wanted to come see me, you had to call me or write to me a month in advance so I could come down off the mountain, pick you up and let you stay for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And I would go fishing and hunting all the time. Um, I think telling his story is big to kids. Um, Doing the nature walks, telling them about how, people use plants for medicinal purposes. Um, Doing our health fair, we do the health fair every year. I think that ties in his naturalistic approach to medicine and to give people those things. Yeah, I think that's how it kind of ties in a little bit to the Pine Barrens. Yeah, and his life, how he lived in the Pine Barrens. How he walked these roads, these dirt roads as a kid, telling them those stories. Yeah, so yeah, I would say that's how it's helpful. And the Pine Barrens, it's funny because the Pine Barrens love the story of Dr. Still. It's so bad that there are still YouTube videos out there of people doing paranormal stuff, and they say that Dr. Still roaming the Pine Barrens, healing people. It's like, come on. The crazy thing is, I had a guy come to me years ago. He was writing a children's book, and he was basing it on characters in South Jersey. And it was kind of mystical, right? The problem that I had that he had Dr. Still giving birth to the Jersey Devil, and I was like, dude, I can't go along with that story. Like, I can't endorse this because, like, first of all, two different time periods. Second of all, Dr. Still wasn't a witch doctor. He was an herbalist. He was a healer. He wasn't into voodoo or anything of that sort. So, but yeah, people, and unfortunately, people see that. I think they see black and they automatically think that he was into that kind of stuff, and he wasn't. He wasn't into any kind of voodoo or witchcraft. He was an herbalist. He was a healer. And back then, being an herbalist was a normal thing. It wasn't odd. It wasn't strange. It wasn't quackery. It was normal things. And I believe he learned some of those remedies from his mother, who West Africans brought things over here. And they brought over, how to survive, because not all these plantations had doctors, right? So they had to learn how to heal them, to eat the food, and find out what was good for them to get better off of. And he learned some stuff from the Native Americans. I don't know if he learned a lot from the Native Americans because he really didn't talk about it. But we do know that he went and got books on physiology, botany, and he learned how to distill these medicines from books on herbal medicine. So this thought that he learned all this stuff from the Native Americans, I believe, is kind of false. Because in his mind, the taught doctors, the formally educated doctors, were giving people mercury and opium, and all that stuff was killing you, long-term wise. Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. I mean, I'm taking sour sap bitters. You know, I'm doing uh, a blood detox tea every day, 2 or 3 times a day. It's got burdock, dandelion in it. It's got what's the other ingredients? Ashwagandha's in it. So I feel better. I know some of the folks at the center do the ginger and turmeric and cayenne pepper tea or the shots. And there's a sense that it makes you feel a little better. Cuts down inflammation. I'm trying to get more into a little bit of yoga now as I get older. I realize because I'm not trying to be in a weight room pounding no weights, and I'm trying to do a little bit of yoga. I meditate in the morning. So I'm doing things that are making me more self-aware of myself and my self-health. It's because you get older, you start realizing that you need other than just medicine, other than just popping pills or going to the doctor. There's other things you can do. Trying to eat better. Trying to cut back from so much processed food. Now that I've cut it all the way out of my life, but I try to do most of the food that I eat is not processed as much. And it's tough because there's so much processed food around us. And it's so easy to say, oh, I can just run to so-and-so and go get this to eat. But you're realizing they put all the salt and all the sugar. I try to not to eat enriched food anymore. I eat jasmine rice now. I'm eating whole wheat, or the Ezekiel type bread. Or I really like the Dave's Killer's bread because it's more healthier. So yeah, it's a resurgence of trying to, because we've learned in that we've been pumping our systems or our bodies full of processed food, and so we got so much cancer and all this other stuff going on. And I think we're all starting to realize that we got to start, and I think the government's starting to realize it too. You know, getting away from it. There's probably sassafras. I would think there's a plant called mullein that's used for herbicide. There's mugwort that's out here. That's right here on the side of the roads. A lot of stuff is on the side of the road. You just don't know it because you're not really studying it. But once you realize, oh, it's on the side of the road.
Comfrey is known as the bone knitter, and it actually helps to heal the body for breaks and strains and sprains, bruises. It helps with all those things. You can actually just cut the leaf, put it on a bruise, put it on a sprain. It will actually help that. And I'm actually going to take a piece and put it on my finger because I have a hurt finger. So I'm just going to take it like this. And this is how you can actually use it, to just wrap it around something. As a massage therapist, I actually use the leaves and I just wrap the client up with the comfrey, and it actually does help. We are making a Comfrey Salve today. You can use a salve, which you're making it with beeswax, or you can use coconut oil or different oils to infuse it, and then you use it to rub it on. This comfrey I bought online, and it's cut, it's dried and cut. So it looks like this. So what you can do is you cut the leaf and it's put into a dehydrator, and that takes out all the moisture, and then it's cut up to be used. And it can be done this way, or it can be done dried. Okay, so we also have some beeswax, and this is just plain beeswax. I also bought this online. And see that finger? Just beeswax pellets. And once the oil is hot, we are going to put the beeswax in to make it a little bit thicker, to make it into a salve. Here is some cut comfrey. So these were fresh out of the garden, and you can do it this way, where you just use a fresh herb, or you can use a dried herb. I have some essential oils, peppermint, and that's going to help to give it just an aroma that's relaxing and calming. Peppermint does help to relax. And I also have vitamin E oil. And the vitamin E oil is going to make it a little bit creamier and smoother, a little bit oilier to help, just make it nice and smooth. Here is some comfrey oil, and I don't know if you can see it, that I've already infused it. See that nice green color there? It's absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. And you know it's ready when it gets to that nice, vibrant green color. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take the cut. I already cut some, but I just wanted you to see it. So when you're using dried, fresh leaves, you want to never put it in the water to wash it. Because if you put water into your infusion, water in the oil will cause a mold. And you don't want that, and then it will get rancid. So it won't be good at all. So you just want to take your hand or a light brush and just brush the leaf of any mud or dirt or bugs that might be on it. And that's sufficient for cleaning it. The process of heating it is going to kill anything that might be on it. What I'm going to do is just going to cut the fresh herb. I'm going to put it in a jar. And basically, I measure it with about 3 cups of herb and 4 cups of oil, if it fits. So I'm going to really pack that in there really good. And then we're going to take olive oil, and it's extra virgin olive oil. And you can use just about any type of oil that you like. I like to use olive oil. And you want to make sure you get in there, and I'm going to get my chopstick and really get in there to make sure that it's going to get dissolved so all the leaf can absorb the oil. And then the constituent of the leaf is going to come out into the oil. Yeah, let me take this if I can. Okay, that was easy. Okay, you really want to fill this up as much as you can. You want to make sure you smush it in there, get all the oil in there. Make sure all the leaves are good and soaked in the oil. you need it now or you need it by tomorrow, you want to take it and put it in some hot water, very low fire, and you want to let it sit for about 3 hours so that the comfrey can infuse into the oil. You're going to put the infusion in the water, and you're going to have a very, very, very small light for about 3 or 4 hours. Every once in a while, you want to come back and move it around, stir it a little bit. Make sure everything's getting infused in there because remember, it's a fresh herb. You want to make sure all the constituents of that herb is coming out into the oil. And what we're going to do is we're going to pour it into a strainer. See that color? Look at that beautiful color. Yes, it is. All right, we want to get all that in there so we can get everything out. Okay, now we're going to take the beeswax and we're going to put beeswax into the oil. And this is going to thicken up our oil. About a 1/4 cup of beeswax. Now we're going to stir it around so the beeswax can melt. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of vitamin E oil. And the vitamin E oil will help it to be smooth, really get into the skin. Vitamin E oil is very good for your skin. So we're just going to put a few drops. Okay. And that's enough, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of viscosity and make it nice and smooth and it'll rub nice. And then I'm going to add essential oil, and this is peppermint oil. And I'm just going to put a few drops of peppermint oil. Ooh, okay. That was about 20 drops. And that smells wonderful. The color is vibrant green. So there's a folklore, a tale about comfrey. And a man and a woman had a son. He fell, he broke his leg. And there was an old woman who lived in a cottage. And she had these green plants behind her house. And she loved her plants. And she talked to them and she watered them and she took care of them. And she was known as the bone knitting lady. And the mother and father brought their son there and she made a poultice of comfrey. And within a couple of months, the boy was up and running and moving around because he was healed by the healing of the comfrey. So it not just feels good going on, but it's good for the bone. It knits the bone, and that's why it's called the bone knitter. And I say it's a good thing to just take the leaf and you can just take it and it doesn't do the work. It tells your body this is what it should be doing. This is what it needs to do. So it helps it. It's like a communicator. It communicates with your body to say, okay, we need to mend. We need to get together. We need to heal. So the plant doesn't do it. It reminds your body that this is what your body is supposed to do. So that's why it's so good to sit with it and resonate. And I just took these because these are buds and this is what it's going to look like. Little purple flowers, and they're actually absolutely beautiful.
Dandelion. My father used to make dandelion wine. So he never put any chemicals out in the yard because this time of year we were out there collecting dandelions so he could make his wine. And I don't know if that's medicinal, but On my father and on us. Well, his older brother Edward still was in the night was fought in North Africa, and when he went to North Africa to Italy, his unit merged with the 92nd Buffalo Soldier Unit. So intentionally, he was a Buffalo Soldier in World War II, right? My father was in an ordnance company, um, and I would say he had friends that he left and got drafted in out of Mount Holly and out of the Pine Barrens, and they went to Fort Shelby, I think it was for him. But they're strange because people who go see combat or been in that kind of, they never really talk about. But what I think for them, it opened up opportunities for them after the war. That a lot of opportunities weren't there. Like my Uncle Ed, after he came back from World War II, he took a job as a supervisor took a government civilian job and worked in Tokyo for 15 years in a mechanic shop. He was a supervisor as a mechanic, working on vehicles and that kind of stuff. So, and when he came back to the States, he ended up, retiring at McGuire Air Force Base as a mechanic in the mechanic pool. My father came out of World War II. He was took the opportunity to go electronics school in Philadelphia. I got a picture of him being the only black guy in the class with a bunch of white guys, and he's in there taking electronic courses. So he took the opportunities that the World War II gave him, well, the Army military gave him, and he's able to find a better job. Because I can imagine there weren't a lot of jobs out here, you know. So yeah, I think, and harden them. They didn't complain about it. You came out of depression, you didn't have anything, right? You didn't complain about stuff because you didn't have it. Nowadays, we don't have our phone on, we don't have Wi-Fi, and people are flipping out. I just had a conversation with somebody this morning about having dinner with family and everybody's on the phone. Like, I hate that. Why can't we sit down and have a conversation and eat a meal and talk about our day or talk about something that's maybe in the news or whatever? But why does everybody got to be scrolling on the phone?
Less connection.
Yeah, we're very much less connected to family and friends, And it's crazy because you are, in a sense, you're less connected, but in the same sense, you're just as much connected. Like my youngest son's in California. He FaceTimes me. So I still get a chance to see him, right? No, we don't talk every day, but I can see him. I'm not writing a letter and I can hear his voice, right? So that's cool. But when we're around each other together sometimes, it's always on the phone. Life now is these short 2-minute videos on TikTok. And when do we get away from that? I don't know, it's just being poor. And I always remember my father saying to me when he was a baby, my grandmother dried up a breast milk, and they sent my father down to the Polish lady to get weaned off of, right? And he always would say to me, when everybody's poor, nobody really cares what color you are, because everybody's in the same pot, right? So going through that struggle of not having and making do with what you had, people sewed back then, right? When's the last time you picked up a needle and thread and sewed a button back on, right? Button fall off, go get a new shirt. Why sew a button on? You get a hole in your pants. I remember growing up, we had patches. They used to tease me and call me patches because I always had the tough skin jeans or the husky jeans from Sears, And I always had patches because I always tore them up. People don't do that now. They don't sew them up. They don't put it. I don't think you put it anyway. They don't even do that. You just get rid of the jeans, or you cut them off, make shorts out of them, and that's it. But people don't, because we got so much in abundance, right? And we want everything fast and gratification now. I want it fixed now. I want to do this now. No one has, sometimes we don't take the patience. I think being when you're poor and you're living out in rural areas, you tend to be a little more patient about your everyday life. I always find when I lived in Hawaii or I would visit people on islands, that's why to me island folks are very laid back because there's not much to do. So you can't really expect much, right? But it's more of an easygoing lifestyle. You're not in this hustle and bustle. And I think we're all somewhere trying to find a little less of that rat race or the hustle and bustle that we're in, especially when you're living in the Northeast. You know, everybody wants to, you want to be someplace quick. You know, you either drive there or you catching a plane or catching a train. And it's always, you want that self-gratification quickly. And no one really wants to take the time to like even cook a meal. You know, I go get, when people used to make their own homemade spaghetti, right? Now you just go get a jar. You don't even do that. You probably just call Pozzarellas or whatever and just go get an order of spaghetti and call it a day, but you don't think about it that way, right? But what happened to those days when people cooked a meal? Now both parents got to be working, right? So who wants to, and you pass your kids off to school or to some private school and you're kind of expecting them to raise your children, but that has changed, It's changed. It's changed in that regard. So it makes it difficult. But some of those values that our elders have taught us, we need to try to remember those values and try to bring some of those values back into our everyday life. Get off the phones. And COVID was rough for us, right? Because COVID, you really were by yourself or in your little microcosm type community, right? A lot of kids were by themselves, right? You're not interacting with people like in school, right? There's something to be said about going to school every day because you learn how to deal with the bullies of the world, right? Learn how to deal with them. Now, as soon as somebody says something, oh, he's bullying me, and now suddenly the kid doesn't even know how to deal with it. And I'm not saying start fighting, but you learn how to deal with the bully in the room, how to stand up to that person, right? Or you learn that, okay, he's not really not a bully, he's just as scared as you are. But we don't even try to, do that no more. Because it's always, everybody's always trying to coddle their children and not, sometimes you gotta let your children fall. You gotta let them fall, let them do what they gotta do. Just like you said, you went off for 2 months and lived off the land. And it was great that your parents, because now when you came back, I'm quite sure your self-confidence about who you were, what kind of person you were, and your survival skills probably went exponentially to a higher level. You know what I mean? For me, like when I went off to college, my parents didn't take me to college. My father put me on a bus at night, 9 o'clock at night in Mount Laurel. I had 5 bags. And when he put me on a bus, he said, don't do anything stupid. Call me in a few days and I'm going to help you the best I can. That was it. And I thought nothing of it. I wasn't upset. I get down to school and my roommate shows up like a day or so later and his mom and dad are there. They're bringing all his stuff. She kicked us out the room so she could wipe down the walls and clean the room. And I'm thinking like, man, what kind of mama's boy is this? But we're best friends to this day, But my father sending me off like that, most people don't do that. So as I got older, I had friends that were taking their kids to school. And I'm like, why are you why are we doing all this? Let them go. Let them fix up their own room. Oh no, we got to. I was like, let them fix up their own room. They're 18. They can make a room. You didn't teach you. You didn't know how to make the bed?
If you did everything good, hopefully
right.
You can.
Yeah, I teach. My youngest son got in trouble with me one time. He missed the school bus. He was on the 7th, 8th grade. And I was working 20 minutes away. And I don't know why he would even call me. He figured he would just walk to school, right? It's a mile and a half away, walk to school. But he called me. He's like, Dad, I missed the bus. I didn't mean miss the bus. So I said, let me come. So I'll be home when I come back home. Stay right there. I'll be right home. So I get home, he's not there. I'm thinking he went to the school, walked. Driving to go to school, he's not there. I hadn't checked in. So I go back, trying to maybe trace where he might have been. And he was going to walk, he was going to 7-Eleven. So bring him back home, and I'm upset with him because, like, dude, I'm at work day. You should be in school, right? So we're outside, we're doing push-ups, mountain climbers. I'm PTing him. I'm doing PT with him for like half an hour. And the whole time I'm telling him, you know, your grandfather went to school, all 18 brothers and sisters went to high school. You know, they went to school because they didn't have the opportunities like you did. And they had to fight to go to school, right? You know, they walked 5 miles each way or whatever. And some of it was true. You know, some of it I exaggerated, but some of it was true. You know, they had like, you got like one pair of shoes all year with my father. And they said that they used to, you know, walk barefooted until they got to school and they put the shoes on because they didn't want to wear the shoes out. So, but I was telling this whole stuff to my son, like, you know, you got to realize that you got opportunities that your grandfather and great grandfathers didn't have, and you got to do those things. You know, you got to be able to endure, to persevere, because what you're going through is nothing. You know, especially not, you know, all the way back to your great grandfather who was a slave. You know, and you gotta. I remind him of that sometimes. Not often as much now. He's in his 30s, or he's close to 30. But when he was younger, it was like, dude, you got it much easier, and you got to get your education. I told him education is knowledge is power, and I put on a brick. I made him write on a brick. I'm as dumb as this brick without my education, and I made him carry it for the last year when he was in school. I took a backpack, an Alice backpack, the army bags. And I took him, we met him at school because he wasn't doing his homework. He was junior in high school. Took him to school, told the vice principal. Vice principal was like, what are you doing? I said, I'm here to do on my son. We're going to go see every single teacher. He says, he's not turning his homework in. I don't know what's going on with him, but we're going to stop that today. So I took him to his locker, made him put all his books in his book bag. And I said, you carry this book bag every day when you come home from school. I'm going to see this book, whatever subject you got, it better be in this book bag. I marched him around, and every single school teacher said, look, you and I are in this together. We're trying to educate him. We got to find a way to reach him. And how we do it, I don't know, but we're going to find a way. And today we're going to work at it. And my whole thing to him was that your aunts and uncles struggle to go to school. You know, my father had to work on a farm to make money. You know, there were so many of them, and they lived in a small house, even when they moved into Mount Holly. So they all had to work. You got a certain age, you were working. You weren't sitting around the house playing video games or just kind of, you know, you was finding your little hustle. So, you know, teaching them those type of things, I think are important, you know, that they need to learn because we're losing that. Because in this world of being self-gratified all the time, gratification, so, you know, instant gratification. Um, my father, my mother was more of a reader than my father. My father he would read the Bible, um, but my mother would read the different stories. She would, because she was trying to teach us, right? But my father was more hands on. He was more hands on. When he took you out in the woods, he was always showing you something. When we went hunting, he was always something. There was always something to learn with him. There was never a day to just go out and do nothing. There was always something he was going to show you. You may not have got the story or the message in the middle of doing it, but he was teaching you something. I remember being left on a log crossing the stream at 5 years old. And I was crying and upset that he was like, come on, you know? And I'm like, I'm scared. And the water was like 6 inches of water. And I'm 5 years old, right? And so he said, stay there. And he walked off. And by the time I crawled over that log and got to him, he had to be a bit of almost an eighth of a mile, half a mile away from me. You know, but he was teaching me something, how to move on. You know, he didn't come by and pick me up and say, oh, I got you. You know, he said, go do it. When he taught me how to swim, he put a life jacket on me and threw me in the pool. My mother used to always say to me, I would rather want you to cry today than for you to get 30 and 40 years old and be crying about something and not know how to handle it, right? So she would always say that to me. Not that they were mean, but my mother was always be like, that the whole thing, suck it up, you know? Or I don't know about you, but like when you had bullies that were picking on you, you better not come in the house talking about someone's picking on you. Go back out there and either fight them or figure it out. But don't come in here crying to me about someone so picking on you. You know, and you get enough times, you get your butt kicked, and you realize that the bully's the same person as you are. That's all. And nobody really wants to get in the fight. It ain't worth it. I still eat a lot of venison. I eat venison at least once a month. Yeah, once a month. The one thing I miss with my father the most is probably rabbit hunting. Is running the dogs. Listening to those dogs chase those rabbits and my father going, oh, he's on this. Oh, he's going that way. Oh, stand over here because rabbit's coming back around. You're like, rabbits, because he's getting chased. But cottontail rabbits, wherever you jump them up at, they sort of make a big circle and they come right back to the same spot. So all you have to do is just stand off to the side, and that rabbit eventually is going to come back around. But I remember eating, we were poor. They would cook stuff on Sunday, and we'd have it like Wednesday, Thursday. Like chicken necks and rice. There's nothing on a chicken neck. But we had a minister that would always come by. I don't know where she got the chicken necks from, but every so often she'd come to the house with this big bag of chicken necks. And we would just eat chicken necks, rice, and some field peas. And that was a meal for 2 or 3 days. Or cabbage and cabbage and ham, right? Now, I knew it as cabbage and ham. I'm 20 years later, I'm at a military function, and they said, we're going to have New England broil tonight, right? What's New England broil? They're all talking about it. All these, people, all my peers are like, oh yeah, we're going to have this New England broil. So I go to the cooks and I go, what are you guys cooking tonight? Oh, it's just cabbage and ham and potatoes. And I was like,
Make it sound all fancy.
yeah, nothing fancy about that. But he gardened. We grew corn, or we always got corn, fresh tomatoes, and all that kind of stuff. So we eat a lot of. My father was known to eat raw onions out the ground, or turnips. Now I'm reading about how good onions are, and garlic is good for you. You know, Now your breath might be a little rank, but it's supposed to be good for you. You know, there's a lot of good benefits to eating raw onions. And he would eat an onion like you would eat an apple. I'm like, dude, how do you do that? Like, oh. But you know, and then he used to make when he cooked cabbage or string beans. He used to take the pot liquor, the water that's used during to boil the vegetables. He used to give that to the dogs. He used to mix it in with the dog food. And he realized one day, he said, the dogs are looking better than him. So we started saving the pot liquor. And when we got colds, he would pull out a cup of, he would take it, give us a cup of cabbage off the pot liquor from the cabbage. And that's what we would sip on that. And that's where your nutrients are when you boil your food like that.
It's in like the broth.
The broth, yeah, the broth, the pot liquor.
Yeah.
Yeah, hunting for my father was about substance. It wasn't about trophies, right? It was about feeding his family. I remember rabbit hunting and Mr. Rabbit one day, and he said, "You missed your lunch." So he didn't. So usually we went hunting like that. He would stop when we go somewhere to get something to eat, piccalillis or whatever. And that particular day, I missed this rabbit plain as day. Shouldn't have no reason why I missed this rabbit. My father worked me all day long in the woods. We hunted all day long, and it was wet all day. We was out there from like 7 o'clock in the morning to like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Because he was like, "You missed that."
But it's about food.
It was about
not
food.
just about missing
It was. It was. It wasn't about missing a rabbit. It was about, Yep. Yeah. Now you're gonna understand what it is. Yeah. Food was hard to come by. We had a cat one time, and I poured milk in the cat's bowl, and the cat sniffed it and acted like he didn't want it. So milk at that age was everything. Milk and peanut butter jelly sandwiches was everything for me at 7 and 8, 9 years old. So I got caught taking the milk in the bowl and pouring it back into the jug. And somebody saw, my sister told on me or something. So instead of them just dumping the milk out, he said, "You like drinking behind the cat, you can drink. You and the cat are that close of friends, you can drink behind the cat for the rest of the time." So I had to drink the rest of that milk for that week. Lesson learned, Food was important, It wasn't a lot. And, nowadays people go, "Oh, well, Johnny doesn't want to eat that. Well, I'll cook something else for John." We didn't have those opportunities. It was like whatever was served on the dining room table, you better eat. You wasn't going to go get a sandwich later on, or no. You sat there until your plate was clean, period. Or you went to bed hungry. We don't do that to our children anymore, The only difference I didn't do that I wanted to change with my sons was that I didn't want to force him to eat more than, when he was full, he was full. I didn't say to him, "Oh," I would put less on his plate so that he wouldn't grow up being shamed about not eating all the food on his plate. And that's one thing I kind of changed. And I think it worked out good for him. He's in much better shape than I am at his age. At his age, he's in much better shape than I am.